am a god.
So when I decided to make my video on The Grey a few months back, I chose to cover it because it was a movie that I felt was criminally misunderstood, mostly due to how it was marketed as an action thriller as opposed to the character-driven narrative it really was. Whenever I managed to convince people to watch it, they're always surprised at just how deep and soulful it is. Those properties are what led me to choose it over my second choice at the time, Jennifer's Body. Much like The Grey, it's a film that was mismarketed to the nth degree, sold to young men and teenage boys on the promise of seeing Megan Fox be hot, a promise it delivers on but misses out on the film's other offerings. And while I'm in no way suggesting that Jennifer's Body is the profound character piece that The Grey is, there's definitely more to it than meets the eye. Speaking of, a few years prior, Megan Fox was launched into superstardom with the blockbuster release of Michael Bay's Transformers and became an overnight celebrity. I was 13 or 14 at the time and was probably more interested in the cars than I was Megan Fox, but I was old enough to understand the appeal. I'd seen her in a few things like Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and I vaguely remember her in an episode of 2.5 Men, but this was a new high for the young actress. Being the designated hot chick of a Michael Bay movie, she wrote that high to an encore performance in Transformers 2 just 2 years later, cementing her place as the Hollywood it girl, all the while being ogled at by audiences. This led Diablo Cody, fresh off her Oscar win for Best Original Screenplay for Juno, writing the titular role of Jennifer specifically for Fox. Opposite Jennifer was Anita, aka Needy, played by Amanda Seyfried. Off the back of her breakout role in Mean Girls and a starring role in Mamma Mia, Cody thought she'd be perfect for the part. On the subject of Mean Girls, it's unironically one of my favorite movies, and I always felt that Amanda Seyfried gave a very underrated performance worthy of more praise. So when I found out that she'd be co-leads with Megan Fox for a project written by the lady who wrote Juno, I was excited to say the least. My excitement only grew when I saw the first trailer and it was revealed that what I assumed would be a comedy actually had some horror elements to it. I was 15, still in my edgelord phase, so dark comedy was my go-to genre. That conflated with the teaser of two wildly attractive women making out, I was exactly the type of bricked up adolescent this film was marketed to, and they got me hook, line, and sinker. Although, I'll admit, I didn't technically pay to see it. We were too young at the time, and my friends and I bought tickets to some other movie, and we snuck into Jennifer's Body from there. And by the time the credits rolled, I was so disappointed. At the time, I just felt like it was so goofy and not in that self-aware kind of way. It was just like they tried to make it good, and it just wasn't. My thirst for horror hadn't been quite quenched enough. So after Jennifer's Body was over, we snuck into this little known found footage movie called Paranormal Activity or something. Watching that, something that actually scared me, in a way made my experience with Jennifer's Body retroactively worse, because a film like Paranormal Activity that I knew little to nothing about blew me away, and something I was hyped for like Jennifer's Body just left me wanting more, and it felt like it had just wasted my time. But that was 15-year-old Josh. 28-year-old Josh has a more nuanced worldview. I've done a lot of growing and maturing since then. So when I watched the film for the first time in over a decade, it legit made me question if I had watched the same movie all those years ago, because I had an absolute blast watching it this time. Much like my younger self, if you're expecting me to wax poetic about hot girls doing hot things, you're gonna be let down. But if you're open-minded and you're willing to give it a chance, I think Jennifer's Body can definitely turn some heads. I know one way to a lost world. While the film does rely on Megan Fox's looks to push the plot, the dynamic between its two leads does a lot of the heavy lifting. When I discussed She-Ra a few videos ago, I put a lot of emphasis on the relationships between the characters and how they contrast with one another being a major selling point of the show, despite its more fantastical properties. The same could be said of Jennifer's Body, despite its supernatural twist. The story takes place in the small fictional town of Devil's Kettle, named after a real-life waterfall. We see that Needy is in a mental institution and the movie is a retelling of events that led her there. Jennifer is your typical, popular, somewhat ditzy high school girl that all the boys want, and Needy is her nerdy, more humble best friend who plays sidekick to her more outgoing other half. In fact, the two are so close that they seem to have some type of mental link that's never really explained in the film.
Jennifer's here.
How do you know?
Needy, quit tampooning yourself and get down here.
That's fucking weird.
Although they balance each other out with Jennifer's confidence and assertiveness against Needy's introspective meekness, it's clear that Jennifer is the dominant one in the friendship, often peer pressuring Needy into doing what she wants. If you've ever been in a best friendship or even observed one, the alpha-beta dynamic within the friend group is one that you should at least be somewhat familiar with. Throwing it back to Mean Girls for a sec, Regina George was the HBIC of the group of girls she presided over, often belittling them or making them feel insecure whenever her authority was threatened or challenged because, well, she herself was insecure and her go-to defense mechanism was projection.
Boo, you whore.
That same denigration is felt between Needy and Jennifer, as Jennifer always feels inclined to make sure Needy knows her place in the hierarchy in order to prop herself up.
What is wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? Besides the obvious surface flaws.
She lords her sexual promiscuity over Needy as a power move, but seems to get frustrated by the fact that Needy is in a loving relationship with her boyfriend Chip, seemingly the one thing that Jennifer has no power over. At a bar, the girls meet this totally not shady indie band called Low Shoulder, where in an attempt to defend Jennifer's honor, Needy lies and informs them that Jennifer is a virgin after hearing some less than respectful remarks about her, inadvertently putting her in danger because following an electrical fire that burns the whole place down and kills several people, they try to get a drunk and in-shock Jennifer into their creepy mystery machine-ass van, and she goes despite pleas from Needy, the two not yet realizing that the trajectory of their lives was about to change forever. That night, Jennifer suddenly appears in Needy's house, battered and bloody. Something malicious has clearly happened to her, but before Needy can get any answers, Jennifer scarfs down a whole chicken, letting out an animalistic screech. When it appears that she's about to hurt Needy, she pulls back, seemingly having regained a sense of her humanity at the last second. After the traumatic night of a deadly fire and a creature from the Black Lagoon, Jennifer pops back up looking as normal as ever, but is cold and callous towards Needy's desire for answers. The mystery of what exactly happened to Jennifer is the crux that the film rests on, and we slowly get more information as it unravels, like when Jennifer seduces a grieving football player named Jonas and leads him into the woods for some post-mortem fellatio, but plot twist, rather than showing him what that mouth do, she shows him what that mouth do. Jennifer is evidently some type of monster now, and her consumption of Jonas not only puts her in this state of glowing euphoria, but also puts the town on high alert because someone or something has murdered this high schooler. Now, I'm not saying I would let Melina over here top me up, but hear me out. Oh, God save me, I'm fucked up. All the while, Low Shoulder is capitalizing on the fire, claiming that they were there saving lives and used the positive PR to promote their new album, leading the song they performed that night, Through the Trees, to become the unofficial anthem of Devil's Kettle, giving a sense of community to a town in the midst of death. This, of course, irritates Needy because she knows they weren't there doing anything to help anyone. But to Diablo Cody's credit, being that exploitative is 1000% something a music label would do, so bonus points for realism. A month goes by and Jennifer looks worse for wear after not feeding for all that time, but seems to have found her next target in a student named Colin, initially rejecting his advances and only accepting them after Needy expresses her admiration for him. Juxtaposed to Needy and Chip sleeping together, Jennifer and Colin have a much more hostile interaction as Jennifer's arrow shifts on a dime to full-blown bloodlust. She starts to eat Colin alive while simultaneously Needy's Jenny sense activates and she can feel something's wrong. And we get this funny little moment with Chip where he thinks he's giving her the juice.
Not hurting you? Am I too big?
For future reference, fellas, if your girl starts moaning while y'all are getting it in, there's a good chance she just saw some demonic shit. It ain't you. Like, humble yourself. Anyway, Needy freaks out and nopes it out of there before getting a Five Nights at Jenny's jump scare and books it home, where Jennifer is already there waiting for her. And despite my praise for this movie, this next part is weird. Having the two leads kiss is one thing, but to have some long, drawn-out, zoomed-in makeout sesh feels odd. Just within the context of the film itself, and given everything Needy has been dealing with, the scene feels so out of place and gratuitous.
Fuck is happening? Oh my god, Needy.
I have never heard you drop the F-bomb before.
Not sure if this was Diablo Cody's call, or the studios, or the directors, and I'm sure someone somewhere has analyzed the deeper meaning behind this scene, but I don't know. So Jen finally comes clean about what happened to her with the low shoulder guys, and it turns out that they were into some dark occult tomfoolery and planned to use her, who they thought was a virgin, as a sacrifice to the devil in exchange for fame and fortune. However, as we know, Jennifer is most certainly not a virgin, and this discrepancy causes the ritual to go sideways.
We're going to have to butcher you. And bleach you. And then Dirk here is going to wear your face. Relax. I'm kidding about the face. The rest is gonna happen though.
After she wakes up from the flurry of knife stabs, that's when she goes to Needy's house like we saw before. But what we didn't see after she left was her finding an isolated student who escaped the bar fire. With no one knowing that he was even alive, she takes the opportunity to give in to her hunger and munches down on him, which makes her realize that eating people, more specifically eating boys, actually restores her energy and gives her the ability to heal. So when she's full, she's practically glowing, but when she's hungry, she looks raggedy AF. After gaslighting Needy when she starts to ask more questions, Needy gets fed up and gives Jennifer the boot. After Colin's funeral, she does a research montage and comes to the conclusion that Jennifer is suffering from demonic possession, but I never really read it that way.
Jennifer's evil.
I know.
No, I mean, she's actually evil. Not high school evil.
According to the Jennifer's Body fandom wiki, they label her a succubus, and while I do think there's obviously some type of demonic entity within her, I don't think it's a possession per se. I think this entity only served to amplify what was already within Jennifer. Even before her murder, we saw how domineering and condescending Jennifer could be toward other people, and all of these negative traits get dialed up to 11 post-stabbing. The most definitive change was the transformation of her lust into a ravenous hunger. With this revelation, Needy tries to keep Chip from going to the spring formal to keep him safe, but my mans is a little frustrated because he already spent his cash.
Who cares about the goddamn dance, Chip?
I do. I ordered your corsage. It's an orchid. It was like $12.
He just like me for real. As men are prone to do, he ignores the good advice of his girlfriend and goes to the dance anyway, but gets cut off by Jennifer. She attacks Chip's insecurities by lying to him about Needy being intimate with Colin and pretends to care about him. This entire charade isn't just for the sake of preheating her meal, but yet another opportunity for her to project her own insecurities onto someone else.
Say I'm better than Needy.
What? Why?
With Chip being the one thing that Needy has over her, Jennifer is determined to rip him away from her to reestablish dominance. Jennifer macking on her dude activates Needy's Jenny sense, and she takes off to find them and eventually tracks them to an abandoned pool house where she finds Jennifer snacking on her dude.
St. Jude, patron saint of all causes, please give me the power to crush this bitch.
Needy manages to separate the two before Jennifer comes floating out of the water like Max getting Vecna'd when Needy tells her what a shitty friend she'd been and calls her out on her copious insecurity, which strikes a nerve.
I am going to eat your soul.
But before she can do anything, Chip exhausts the last of his energy and stabs Jennifer with a pole. She needs to heal, so she bails out of there, but Chip, suffering from his wounds, lets Needy know that he loves her and dies, putting Needy in a state of shock. She decides enough is enough and prepares to kill Jennifer to prevent her from hurting anyone else. She bursts through the window of Jennifer's room to catch her off guard, but ends up getting bitten. giving Jennifer just enough energy to go airborne. In the scuffle, Needy rips off Jennifer's BFF pendant, and I think this triggers Jennifer into regaining her humanity for just a second. Before, we saw her hesitate to kill Needy when she got close to Needy's pendant, so it makes sense that she'd view it as the symbol of their friendship. After all they'd been through, Needy was still someone she cared about. Needy was still her best friend. Realizing what she's done, she surrenders and starts to fall. Looking Needy in her big expressive eyes, mercifully asking to be put out of her misery, and Needy obliges by stabbing her in the heart, eradicating both the demon and her oldest friend. It's narratively satisfying to have Needy not only overcome the monster, but the person who'd consistently tried to make her feel small and unworthy, unlocking a new confidence that she didn't even know she had. But unfortunately, Jennifer's mom walks in while Needy still has the box cutter plunged into her body, and she gets committed to a mental asylum, bringing us full circle back to the beginning of the movie. An interesting development is that apparently when a demon bites you and you survive, you gain some of the demon's abilities, which Needy puts to good use and escapes the asylum. With vengeance on her mind, she hitches a ride to find the people directly responsible for the death of her best friend, boyfriend, and all the people of Devil's Kettle. And roll credits. There's an end credits montage of the band members being killed in a hotel, so it's a safe assumption that Needy took them out. Needy hunting the douchebags from Low Shoulder would have made for a great sequel, but due to a combination of mass mismarketing, idiots like myself not paying to see it, and the fact that this film was way ahead of its time, the film bombed at the box office and it was ultimately panned by critics. Had this movie come out in 2019 as opposed to 2009, I can't help but feel like it would be looked at in the same vein as those female-centric dark comedies like the Happy Death Day duology or Ready or Not. And I know this because Jennifer's Body has built up a cult following after all this time. I almost expect to get a little backlash because of this video, because the fans are fiercely protective of this movie, and even more so of Megan Fox, which is understandable given the way they've both been dragged through the mud by the media and Hollywood. Diablo Cody wrote Jennifer and Needy as reflections of different sides of her persona, with one being the take-no-shit Turbo Chad and the other being more reserved and considerate. And that difference is exemplified in the way the roads in the industry have been paved differently for Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried respectively. Seyfried would go on to slowly but surely rise up to A-lister status, culminating in an Oscar nom for Mank. The industry has always been patriarchal and misogynistic toward young actresses viewed as bombshells, but Fox was so over-sexualized from a young age that she'd go on to exclaim how dehumanizing it truly was. She compared being sacrificed in the film to being sacrificed to these movie studios who were ready to milk every dollar they could get out of her without even considering how she felt about it. After her ousting from Transformers 3 due to being unable to deal with Michael Bay's misogynistic direction, Megan Fox's career slowed down a bit as she began to have kids and took on smaller roles, but within the last couple of years, the tide really seems to be changing for her. Much like Needy overcoming her demons and gaining new power, with time, Megan overcame a lot of the negativity and vitriol hurled her way and came out on the other side a much stronger person. As we become more and more familiar with some of Hollywood's shadier practices, Fox became a more empathetic figure in the light of the Me Too movement, even if she didn't always feel like she'd be welcome. She eventually made up with Michael Bay to star in the 2 live-action Ninja Turtles movies, and she even got together with the rap devil himself.
You said to me,
You smell like weed.
and I said, I am weed.
And they seem cute, if not a little weird, but I'm glad she managed to find someone she can be her authentic self with. I think she's earned that. And even though Meg's still out here doing real hot girl shit, she looks back fondly at Jennifer's Body as her favorite project she's ever worked on because that experience made her who she is. Bookended by Diablos and Devils, whatever Megan Fox does next is sure to set the world on fire. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I was really nervous about getting on camera because I've been sick for 2 weeks and my throat has been on fire. And I told myself if that mummy video did well, I would get on camera and get out of my comfort zone. So that's what I did. Social media links will be in the description. And if you guys could like and subscribe, that'd be great too. But yeah, till next time, I'm Josh Fleeks. Y'all be easy.